My name is Sarah Chen, and 5 years ago, my parents stood up during my college graduation ceremony and called me worthless in front of 3,000 people. Last month, I handed them eviction papers from the Victorian mansion they dreamed of owning their entire lives. The same house I'd just purchased for $8 million cash. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Growing up in the suburbs of Denver, Colorado, our split-level ranch house on Willow Creek Drive looked modest from the outside, but inside lived the suffocating weight of impossible expectations. My father, Robert Chen, worked as a mechanical engineer at an aerospace company, while my mother, Linda, managed the books for a small accounting firm downtown. Together, they earned a comfortable upper-middle-class income that afforded us family vacations, private music lessons, and a college fund that came with strings attached like steel cables. From the moment I could hold a pencil, my parents made it clear that success wasn't just expected, it was demanded. A grades weren't celebrated, they were the baseline. B grades triggered lectures about wasted potential and comparisons to other families' children, who were supposedly outperforming me in every conceivable way. My younger brother Marcus, 3 years my junior, learned early to fly under the radar while I bore the full weight of their academic ambitions. The Chen family operated under one fundamental principle that my father repeated like a mantra during every family dinner, every report card discussion, every conversation about my future. Excellence is not a destination, it's a journey without end. Mediocrity is a choice, and we don't raise children who choose mediocrity. My mother would nod along, adding her own commentary about how fortunate I was to have parents who cared enough to push me toward greatness, unlike other families who let their children settle for average lives. Our dinner table conversations revolved around my latest test scores, upcoming assignments, and strategies for maintaining my class ranking. While other families discussed movies, weekend plans, or shared funny stories from their day, we analyzed my performance metrics like stock market investments. My father kept a detailed spreadsheet tracking my grades across all subjects, updating it weekly and reviewing trends during what he called our Sunday strategy sessions. These sessions took place in his home office, a space dominated by engineering textbooks, framed certificates from his own academic achievements, and a large whiteboard where he diagrammed my path to success. The walls displayed his engineering degree from Colorado State University, various professional certifications, and exactly one family photo, my 8th grade graduation picture, where I'd won the Academic Excellence Award. No casual family snapshots, no vacation memories, just evidence of achievement and potential. My mother participated in these sessions by taking detailed notes about my study schedule optimization and tracking my extracurricular activities for maximum college application impact. She'd researched the backgrounds of successful professionals and created templates for how my teenage years should unfold to match their trajectories. Dance classes weren't about joy or self-expression. They were about demonstrating well-roundedness to admissions committees. Volunteer work at the local animal shelter wasn't about compassion for animals. It was about building character references and leadership experience. The pressure intensified as high school approached. My parents enrolled me in advanced summer programs, hired private tutors for subjects where I showed even slight weakness, and began talking about college applications when I was barely 14. They'd identified their target schools early: Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Princeton, and reverse engineered my entire high school experience to maximize admission chances. Every decision about coursework, extracurriculars, and even friendships passed through the filter of college preparedness. My social life existed only within approved parameters. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Friendships were evaluated based on whether other families shared similar academic values and whether my friends posed potential distractions from my studies. Dating was absolutely forbidden until college, and even casual social gatherings required advance approval and detailed explanations about educational value. I learned to navigate these restrictions by becoming an expert at managing my parents' expectations, while carving out tiny spaces of normal teenage experience. My best friend throughout high school was Emma Rodriguez, whose parents thankfully shared a more balanced approach to academic achievement. At Emma's house, I glimpsed what normal family dynamics look like. Her parents asked about her day without immediately pivoting to grade analysis. They celebrated small victories, and didn't treat minor setbacks as catastrophic failures. Her mother cooked dinner while laughing at her father's terrible jokes, and their family game nights involved actual fun rather than disguised learning opportunities. Emma often invited me to join their family activities, and I treasured these glimpses of relaxed family life. Her parents treated me with warmth and genuine interest in my thoughts and feelings beyond academic performance. Mrs. Rodriguez would ask about my favorite books, not because she was evaluating my reading level, but because she enjoyed discussing stories. Mr. Rodriguez taught me to change a tire and check oil levels, practical skills my father considered beneath our family's intellectual focus. The contrast between our households became increasingly stark as I spent more time with Emma's family. At my house, conversations remained transactional and goal-oriented. At Emma's house, people talked because they enjoyed each other's company. Her parents showed affection through casual physical contact, inside jokes, and spontaneous expressions of pride that weren't tied to specific achievements. I began to understand that love could exist without performance requirements. Meanwhile, my brother Marcus developed his own survival strategies within our family system. 3 years younger and naturally more rebellious, he quickly learned that direct confrontation with our parents' expectations led to extended conflicts that made everyone miserable. Instead, he mastered the art of strategic underperformance, maintaining grades just high enough to avoid major consequences while pursuing his real interests in music and skateboarding. Marcus and I developed an unspoken alliance against the constant pressure. When our parents focused their intensity on my academic performance, he'd create small distractions that shifted attention away from my minor failures. When they criticized his lack of academic focus, I'd redirect conversations toward positive aspects of his creativity and artistic talents. We protected each other in small ways that our parents never noticed, building a sibling bond forged in mutual understanding of our family's dysfunction. Our parents' marriage itself reflected their approach to life: efficient, goal-oriented, and devoid of apparent spontaneity or romance. They functioned as business partners in the project of raising successful children rather than as lovers who happened to be parents. Their conversations centered around logistics, planning, and problem-solving rather than emotional connection or shared dreams beyond our academic achievements. I rarely saw them display physical affection toward each other or engage in playful banter. Their idea of quality time together involved reviewing our academic progress and strategizing about our futures. Date nights were planning sessions held at upscale restaurants, where they could discuss family business without interruption. Even their anniversary celebrations focused on reviewing family goals and adjusting long-term strategies rather than celebrating their relationship. This emotional distance extended to their relationships with Marcus and me. Physical affection was rare and usually tied to significant achievements. Hugs came after good report cards or successful performances. Expressions of love were conditional statements about pride in our accomplishments, rather than unconditional affirmations of our worth as human beings. I learned to interpret their satisfaction with my performance as love, though something deep inside me always felt hungry for connection that existed separate from my achievements. The financial pressure added another layer of complexity to our family dynamics. While my parents earned comfortable incomes, they'd structured their entire lifestyle around investing in our futures. They'd foregone luxury purchases, elaborate vacations, and home improvements to fund our educational expenses and enrichment activities. This sacrifice was frequently mentioned during discussions about my performance, creating an implicit debt that I was expected to repay through exceptional achievement. My father often reminded me that other families spent money on frivolous things, while we invested in building my future earning potential. The private tutors, summer programs, and application fees represented substantial financial commitments that came with corresponding expectations for return on investment. I felt the weight of their financial sacrifice every time my performance fell short of their standards, knowing that disappointing them meant wasting money they'd allocated for my success. My mother tracked these investments meticulously, maintaining spreadsheets that quantified the cost of my education and projected the financial benefits of attending elite universities. She'd calculated the lifetime earning differences between graduates of target schools versus state universities, presenting these figures as justification for the pressure they applied. According to her analysis, every hour of additional studying and every point of GPA improvement translated directly into future financial security. This financial framework colored every aspect of my high school experience. Course selections weren't about intellectual curiosity or personal interest. They were about maximizing weighted GPA and demonstrating academic rigor to admissions committees. Extracurricular activities weren't chosen for enjoyment or passion. They were selected based on leadership opportunities and unique angles that would differentiate my applications from other candidates. Even my part-time job during junior and senior year was evaluated through this lens. While other students worked at retail stores or restaurants to earn spending money, my parents insisted I find positions that would enhance my resume. I ended up tutoring younger students in mathematics and science, work that provided excellent application material but little opportunity for the normal social interactions that come with typical teenage employment. The tutoring work did provide one unexpected benefit. It helped me recognize my natural teaching abilities and genuine enjoyment of helping others understand complex concepts. Working with struggling students revealed my patience and communication skills in ways that standardized testing never captured. These sessions became some of the few times during high school when I felt authentically myself, rather than performing a role designed to meet external expectations. However, even this positive experience was immediately co-opted by my parents' achievement framework. They praised my tutoring success primarily because it demonstrated leadership and service commitment for college applications. When I mentioned enjoying the actual teaching process, they redirected the conversation toward how this experience positioned me for future academic and professional opportunities, rather than acknowledging my personal satisfaction with the work. Senior year brought the culmination of all this preparation as college application deadlines approached. The stress in our household reached nearly unbearable levels as every aspect of my academic and personal history was scrutinized for maximum impact. My parents hired a college consultant who specialized in applications to elite universities, adding another layer of professional pressure to an already intense process. The consultant, Dr. Patricia Williams, brought a clinical approach to application strategy that somehow made my parents' methods seem almost relaxed by comparison. She analyzed my transcript, test scores, and extracurricular activities with surgical precision, identifying weaknesses that needed addressing and strengths that required better positioning. Under her guidance, my personal essays became carefully crafted marketing documents designed to present me as the ideal candidate rather than authentic. Reflections of my thoughts and experiences. Every word of every essay underwent multiple rounds of revision and professional editing. My genuine interests and personal growth were reshaped into narratives that aligned with what admissions committees supposedly wanted to hear. The girl who loved reading fantasy novels became a future researcher, interested in exploring human psychology through literature. The teenager who enjoyed tutoring younger students became a future educator committed to advancing academic excellence in underserved communities. This process felt like slowly erasing myself and replacing my authentic self with an optimized version designed for institutional approval. I began to lose track of my actual interests and opinions, as they became buried under layers of strategic positioning and careful image management. The line between my real personality and my application persona blurred until I wasn't sure which version represented the true me. The waiting period after submitting applications created its own unique form of torture. My parents obsessively checked application portals and discussed admissions timelines with other families going through similar processes. They analyzed every piece of communication from universities for hidden meanings and strategic implications. Normal family conversations became impossible, as everything filtered through the lens of pending admissions decisions. During this time, I began experiencing anxiety symptoms that I'd never dealt with before. Sleep became difficult as my mind raced through worst-case scenarios and contingency plans. My appetite decreased, and I lost weight that I couldn't afford to lose. Concentration became challenging even for routine schoolwork, as my thoughts constantly returned to application outcomes and their potential impact on my family relationships. My parents interpreted these symptoms as normal pre-admissions stress and responded by increasing their supportive oversight rather than recognizing signs of unhealthy pressure. They scheduled additional meetings with the college consultant, researched stress management techniques focused on maintaining academic performance, and created detailed backup plans for various admission scenarios. Their solution to my anxiety was more planning and preparation, rather than addressing the underlying pressure that was causing my distress. Emma noticed the changes in my behavior and tried to provide support within the limited time and space my parents allowed for social interaction. She'd invite me for brief coffee outings where I could vent about the constant pressure and uncertainty. Her perspective helped me recognize that the intensity of my family's college preparation far exceeded normal bounds, though I felt powerless to change the situation so close to graduation. Marcus, now a high school freshman himself, was beginning to experience the early stages of the same pressure that had consumed my teenage years. I watched my parents apply lessons learned from my application process to his academic planning, creating even more sophisticated strategies for maximizing his future college prospects. The cycle was repeating itself, and I felt helpless to protect him from the emotional costs I was experiencing. The spring of senior year brought admissions decisions that would determine not just my future, but the success or failure of my family's entire 18-year investment strategy. The stakes couldn't have been higher, and everyone in our household understood that my college acceptance letters would serve as the final verdict on whether all the pressure, sacrifice, and strategic planning had been worthwhile. What none of us anticipated was how completely everything would unravel on what should have been the most celebrated day of our lives together. The acceptance letter from Northwestern University arrived on a Thursday afternoon in March, and I'll never forget the sound of my mother's sharp intake of breath as she read it over my shoulder. Not Stanford, not MIT, not Harvard. Northwestern was a prestigious school by any reasonable standard. But in the Chen household, reasonable standards had been abandoned long ago in favor of impossible ones. My father's reaction was even more telling. He set down his coffee mug with deliberate precision, the kind of controlled movement that preceded his most devastating critiques. Northwestern, he repeated, as if the word tasted bitter in his mouth. We'll need to review what went wrong in your application strategy. Not congratulations, not pride, just immediate analysis of failure and blame assignment. The other rejection letters followed over the next 2 weeks, each one landing like a physical blow to our family's carefully constructed plans. MIT sent a polite form letter. Harvard's rejection was brief and clinical. Stanford's response felt almost mocking in its generic encouragement to pursue excellence elsewhere. With each rejection, I watched my parents' faces grow more disappointed, more frustrated, more convinced that somehow I had failed to execute their perfect strategy. Dr. Williams, our college consultant, scheduled an emergency meeting to conduct what she called a a post-mortem analysis of my application results. Sitting in her pristine office surrounded by acceptance letters from other families' successful children, I felt like a specimen being examined for defects. She reviewed my essays, recommendation letters, and interview performance with surgical precision, searching for the flaws that had prevented admission to our target schools. Sarah's academic credentials were certainly competitive, Dr. Williams explained to my parents while I sat silently in the corner chair. However, the applicant pool for these institutions has become increasingly difficult to predict. Sometimes qualified candidates are rejected simply due to the overwhelming number of applications they receive. Her professional explanation felt hollow, like a doctor delivering a terminal diagnosis with clinical detachment. My father interrupted her mid-sentence. We didn't pay for explanations about unpredictable processes, we paid for results. If the strategy was sound, Sarah must have failed to execute it properly. His words cut through me like ice water, reducing 4 years of relentless effort to personal failure. The implication was clear. I had somehow sabotaged my own applications through inadequate performance or preparation. My mother nodded in agreement, adding her own analysis of where I'd fallen short. Maybe the volunteer work wasn't distinctive enough. Or perhaps the leadership positions weren't impressive enough for admissions committees. We should have pushed harder for more unique experiences that would have set her apart from other applicants. Every criticism felt like another nail in the coffin of my self-worth. The conversation continued for another hour as the adults in the room dissected my teenage years like forensic investigators examining evidence. My test scores were adequate, but not exceptional. My essays were well written, but perhaps too conventional. My extracurricular activities demonstrated commitment, but lacked the uniqueness that would have captured admissions officers' attention. Nothing I had accomplished was ever quite enough to meet their elevated standards. Northwestern's acceptance, which should have been cause for celebration, became a consolation prize that highlighted everything I had failed to achieve. The scholarship offer that covered 60% of tuition costs was dismissed as insufficient compensation for not gaining admission to more prestigious institutions. The honors program invitation was noted but not praised. Even the personal letter from the dean expressing enthusiasm for my potential contributions went largely unacknowledged. Dr. Williams attempted to redirect the conversation toward positive aspects of attending Northwestern, emphasizing the university's strong academic reputation and excellent career placement statistics. She mentioned successful alumni in various fields and highlighted specific programs that aligned with my stated interests in psychology and education. Her efforts to reframe the situation felt forced and unconvincing, given the obvious disappointment permeating the room. Northwestern is certainly a respectable institution, my father conceded, with the tone of someone settling for an inferior product. But we invested 18 years in positioning Sarah for elite university admission. This outcome represents a significant underperformance relative to our expectations and financial investment. He spoke about my education like a failed business venture, calculating return on investment rather than celebrating achievement. The aftermath of admissions decisions created a toxic atmosphere in our house that persisted throughout the remainder of senior year. My parents' disappointment hung over every family interaction like a dark cloud that refused to dissipate. Conversations became stilted and uncomfortable as they struggled to process their deflated expectations while maintaining the facade of supportive parenting. Marcus bore witness to this transformation in our family dynamics, and I could see him absorbing lessons about the conditional nature of our parents' approval. He began working even harder in his own classes, terrified of experiencing similar disappointment when his college application process began. The pressure that had consumed my teenage years was already beginning to transfer to him, creating a generational cycle of impossible expectations. Friends and extended family members who asked about my college plans were met with carefully crafted responses that emphasized Northwestern's positive qualities while subtly communicating our family's disappointment with the outcome. My parents became expert at delivering backhanded compliments that praised the university while suggesting I could have achieved more with better preparation or performance. The financial discussions surrounding college costs took on a punitive tone that made me feel like I was being charged interest on my failure to secure better scholarship offers. My father calculated the difference between Northwestern's costs and what elite universities would have charged, presenting the comparison as evidence of missed opportunities rather than acknowledging the significant scholarship I had earned. My mother began researching transfer possibilities almost immediately, treating Northwestern as a temporary stepping stone rather than my actual college destination. She collected information about transfer requirements for Stanford and MIT, suggesting that I could potentially correct my undergraduate mistake through exceptional performance during my first 2 years. The pressure that had defined high school was being extended into college before I had even graduated. Prom season arrived with its typical flurry of dress shopping and date arrangements, but my parents showed little interest in these traditional senior year celebrations. They viewed social activities as distractions from academic focus and seemed particularly resentful of any expenses that didn't contribute directly to educational advancement. My prom dress was selected based on cost rather than my preferences, and the entire experience felt hollow and perfunctory. Emma tried to inject some normalcy into this period by organizing group activities that didn't require parental approval or supervision. We spent afternoons at coffee shops discussing our hopes for college and sharing excitement about finally escaping the intense pressure of high school. Her enthusiasm for her own college plans at Colorado State helped me remember that normal families celebrated their children's achievements rather than dwelling on perceived failures. During these conversations with Emma, I began to articulate feelings that I had never been able to express at home. The constant criticism and impossible expectations had eroded my confidence and self-worth in ways that I was only beginning to understand. I felt like I had spent 4 years performing a role rather than developing my authentic identity, and the prospect of continuing this performance in college felt exhausting. Emma listened without judgment as I described the suffocating weight of my parents' disappointment and their plans to use college as an opportunity to correct my high school failures. She helped me recognize that my feelings of inadequacy were manufactured by unreasonable expectations, rather than actual shortcomings in my performance or character. Her perspective provided a crucial outside reference point for evaluating my family's behavior. The spring semester of senior year dragged on with agonizing slowness as I waited for graduation day to arrive. My parents had already begun discussing summer plans that involved additional preparation for college success, including advanced coursework that would position me for eventual transfer to a more prestigious institution. The brief period between high school and college, that should have been relaxing and celebratory, was being converted into another round of strategic preparation. My relationship with both parents became increasingly strained as they struggled to process their disappointment while maintaining the illusion of supportive parenting. Conversations became transactional exchanges focused on logistics and requirements rather than emotional connection or mutual enjoyment. The conditional love that had always characterized our relationships became even more apparent as their approval diminished, along with their pride in my achievements. Teachers and counselors at school noticed the change in my demeanor as graduation approached. Mrs. Henderson, my AP psychology teacher, asked me privately if everything was okay at home after observing my withdrawal from class discussions and decreased participation in activities I had previously enjoyed. I deflected her concerns with generic responses about college stress, unwilling to admit the depth of dysfunction in my family relationships. The graduation ceremony planning became another source of conflict, as my parents debated whether to invite extended family members to witness what they considered a disappointing culmination of my academic career. They ultimately decided to keep the gathering small, ostensibly to minimize expenses but really to limit the number of people who would witness their public acknowledgement of my failure to meet their expectations. My father's sister, Aunt Janet, called to congratulate me on my Northwestern acceptance and express excitement about attending my graduation ceremony. Her genuine enthusiasm for my achievement stood in stark contrast to my parents' muted disappointment, and I felt grateful for at least one family member who seemed proud of my accomplishments. However, her presence at graduation would also mean additional witnesses to whatever public humiliation my parents might inflict. The week before graduation, my mother sat me down for what she called a heart-to-heart conversation about managing expectations for college success. The discussion felt more like a performance review than maternal guidance, as she outlined specific strategies for maximizing my GPA during freshman year and positioning myself for transfer opportunities. Her advice focused entirely on correcting past mistakes rather than building on existing strengths. "You'll need to work twice as hard as other students because you're starting from behind," she explained with clinical detachment. "Northwestern may not be Stanford, but it can still provide opportunities if you're willing to outperform your peers consistently. This is your chance to prove that the admissions disappointment was a fluke rather than a reflection of your actual capabilities." Her words stung with their implication that my worthiness remained unproven. My father's contribution to this conversation focused on the financial investment they had made in my education and their expectations for return on that investment through my future earning potential. He presented detailed calculations showing how Northwestern graduates' average starting salaries compared to those from elite institutions, emphasizing the financial cost of my admissions failures. Every dollar they had spent on my education was being reframed as a debt that I owed through future success. The night before graduation, I lay awake in my bed listening to my parents discuss the ceremony logistics in the room below. Their voices carried clearly through the thin floors, and I heard them debating whether to host a celebration dinner afterward or simply return home quietly. The decision ultimately came down to whether they felt my achievement warranted public acknowledgement or private disappointment. "She worked hard," my mother said, her voice lacking conviction. "Maybe we should at least take her out for dinner afterward." The qualifier in her statement revealed everything. I had worked hard, but hard work without exceptional results was merely participation rather than achievement. My father's response was even more telling. "We'll see how the ceremony goes. If she gives a good speech and represents the family well, we can consider celebrating." The conditional nature of their potential celebration captured everything wrong with our family dynamic. Their pride in my achievement depended not on the accomplishment itself, but on my ability to perform their expectations successfully during the public ceremony. Even graduation day was being treated as another test that I could potentially fail, rather than a milestone worthy of unconditional celebration. Lying there in the darkness, I realized that nothing I accomplished would ever be enough to earn their unconditional approval. The goalposts would always move, the standards would always escalate, and their love would always depend on my ability to exceed their ever-increasing expectations. This recognition filled me with a mixture of sadness and determination that would ultimately shape how I responded to their behavior at graduation. The morning of graduation dawned clear and warm, perfect weather for the outdoor ceremony that would mark the end of my high school career and the beginning of my adult life. As I got dressed in my cap and gown, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pride in my achievements, anxiety about my parents' behavior, and anticipation for the freedom that college would provide. I had no idea that this day would become the turning point that would ultimately redefine every relationship in my family. The car ride to the school was tense and quiet, with my parents making last-minute reminders about proper behavior during the ceremony and expectations for my post-graduation speech if I was selected to speak. Their instructions felt like coaching for a performance rather than support for celebrating my academic accomplishments. Marcus sat beside me in the back seat, offering silent solidarity through occasional reassuring glances. As we arrived at the school and I prepared to join my classmates for the processional, I looked back at my parents standing among the other families in the audience. They appeared proud and supportive from a distance, their public personas masking the private disappointment that had characterized our interactions for months. I had no way of knowing that their carefully constructed facade was about to crumble in front of 3,000 witnesses. The graduation ceremony began exactly as rehearsed, with our class of 412 students filing into the outdoor amphitheater while the string quartet played Pomp and Circumstance. I found my assigned seat in the third row, my surname placing me early in the alphabet, and close enough to the stage that I could see the disappointment flickering across my parents' faces in the audience. They sat rigidly upright, my mother clutching her purse like a shield, and my father checking his watch as if the ceremony was an inconvenience, interrupting more important business. Principal Morrison began the proceedings with his traditional speech about bright futures and limitless potential, words that felt hollow after months of living with my parents' crushing disappointment. I watched other families in the audience beaming with pride, taking photos and whispering excitedly to each other about their graduates' achievements. The contrast with my own family's stiff formality was painfully obvious, and I felt a familiar ache of longing for the unconditional celebration that seemed so natural for everyone else. The first sign of trouble came during the academic awards presentation. Students were called forward to receive recognition for various achievements, and I noticed my parents' posture becoming increasingly rigid as other families celebrated their children's honors. When Emma Rodriguez was called forward to receive the Community Service Award, her parents erupted in cheers and applause that echoed across the amphitheater. My father's jaw tightened visibly, and my mother's smile became more forced with each recognition ceremony that didn't include my name. Marcus had been selected to present one of the awards, representing the junior class and honoring graduating seniors. As he walked across the stage with his easy confidence and genuine smile, I felt a surge of pride that my parents seemed incapable of sharing. Instead, I caught my mother leaning over to whisper something to my father, their faces both reflecting the same critical assessment they applied to everything in their lives. Even Marcus's moment of recognition was being evaluated through their lens of competitive achievement, rather than celebrated as a proud family milestone. The keynote speaker, Dr. Rebecca Martinez from the University of Colorado, delivered an inspiring address about resilience and pursuing passion over prestige. Her words about finding success through authentic self-expression and meaningful contribution resonated deeply with me, though I knew my parents would dismiss her message as idealistic nonsense that ignored practical realities about career advancement and financial security. She spoke about students who had thrived at lesser-known institutions and found extraordinary success by following their genuine interests rather than external expectations. As Dr. Martinez concluded her speech with encouragement about embracing uncertainty and trusting our own judgment, I felt a flutter of hope that maybe Northwestern could become the fresh start I desperately needed. Perhaps away from my parents' constant oversight and criticism, I could finally discover who I actually was beneath the layers of performance and strategic positioning that had defined my teenage years. The possibility of authentic self-discovery felt both thrilling and terrifying after so many years of living according to other people's definitions of success. Then came the moment that changed everything. Principal Morrison announced that several graduating students would be recognized for exceptional academic achievement and leadership, followed by brief remarks from selected graduates about their high school experience and future plans. My name was called third, along with 5 other students who had maintained high GPAs while demonstrating significant leadership and community involvement throughout our 4 years. Standing at the podium, looking out at 3,000 faces including my parents' expectant expressions, I felt a moment of genuine pride in my accomplishments. Despite the constant pressure and impossible standards, I had actually achieved something meaningful. I had maintained a 3.9 GPA while participating in student government, tutoring younger students, and contributing hundreds of volunteer hours to local organizations. These achievements deserved recognition regardless of which university had accepted me. I began my brief speech by thanking my teachers, mentors, and fellow students for their support throughout high school. I spoke about the value of hard work and persistence, themes that I knew would resonate with the audience, while avoiding controversial topics that might reflect poorly on my family. My words were carefully chosen to represent our family positively while expressing genuine gratitude for the opportunities I had received. High school has taught me that success comes in many forms, I continued, building toward what I thought would be an inspiring conclusion. While I'm excited to attend Northwestern University in the fall, I've learned that the name on your diploma matters less than the effort you put into earning it and the character you develop along the way. True achievement comes from pursuing excellence for its own sake, not from meeting other people's expectations or competing for external validation. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, and I felt a moment of pure satisfaction as I saw teachers and classmates nodding in approval. For perhaps the first time in my high school career, I had spoken authentically about my own values rather than performing someone else's script. The words felt true and meaningful, reflecting insights I had gained through years of navigating impossible expectations and learning to define success on my own terms. But as I returned to my seat, I caught sight of my parents' faces and immediately realized that my moment of authentic expression had been a catastrophic mistake. My father's face was flushed with anger, his hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. My mother looked mortified, her carefully maintained composure cracking as she processed the public implications of my speech. I had essentially announced to 3,000 people that their approach to parenting and definition of success was wrong. The remainder of the ceremony passed in a blur of dread as I watched my parents' anger intensify with each passing minute. Other students received their diplomas with joyful family celebrations, but I knew that my own diploma presentation would be followed by consequences I couldn't fully anticipate. When my name was finally called, I walked across the stage to polite applause, while my parents sat motionless in their seats, their disapproval radiating across the amphitheater like a toxic cloud. After the official ceremony concluded, families gathered on the lawn for photographs and celebrations. I searched the crowd for my parents, hoping that perhaps the public setting would moderate their response to my speech. Instead, I found them standing apart from other families, their body language broadcasting fury and embarrassment to anyone observant enough to notice. Marcus stood beside them looking uncomfortable and apologetic, clearly aware that storm clouds were gathering. My father approached me with controlled steps, his voice low and dangerous when he spoke. "That was quite a performance up there, Sarah. I hope you enjoyed your moment of self-expression, because it's going to cost you more than you realize." His words carried the weight of 18 years of conditional love and financial control, and I felt my stomach drop as I realized the full implications of my public defiance. My mother joined the conversation with her own brand of passive-aggressive criticism, speaking loudly enough that nearby families could overhear her words. "We're so proud of Sarah's creativity," she announced with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "She's always been imaginative about reframing disappointment as achievement. It's such a valuable skill for someone who will need to make the best of limited opportunities." The public nature of her criticism was deliberate and cruel, designed to humiliate me in front of classmates and their families. while maintaining plausible deniability about her intentions. Several people nearby stopped their conversations to stare, clearly recognizing that something uncomfortable was happening but uncertain how to respond. Emma's parents exchanged concerned glances and began moving in our direction, but my father's intimidating presence kept them at a safe distance. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation at home," I suggested quietly, hoping to avoid a public scene that would embarrass our entire family. The gathering was supposed to be a celebration, and other families were watching our interaction with growing discomfort. I still held on to some hope that we could resolve this conflict privately and salvage what remained of graduation day. My father's response shattered any remaining illusions about maintaining family dignity or privacy. "No, Sarah. I think this conversation needs to happen right here, right now, in front of all these people who just heard you publicly criticize your family and everything we've sacrificed for your education." His voice rose with each word, drawing attention from families throughout the surrounding area. "You stood up there and told 3,000 people that our approach to your education was wrong," he continued, his anger building momentum. "You suggested that achievement doesn't matter, that pursuing excellence is somehow misguided, that settling for mediocrity is perfectly acceptable. Well, let me tell you something about mediocrity, Sarah. It's exactly what you've achieved, and it's exactly what you'll continue to achieve with that attitude." The words hit me like physical blows. But worse was the growing circle of families who had stopped their own celebrations to witness my public humiliation. I could see Emma's mortified expression as she watched my father tear down everything I had accomplished, reducing 4 years of hard work to mediocrity and failure. Other classmates and their parents were backing away slowly, uncomfortable with the intensity of his anger but unable to look away from the spectacle. My mother added her own contribution to the public degradation, her voice carrying clearly across the lawn. 18 years of sacrifice, private tutors, enrichment programs, and endless support, and this is how you repay us? By standing in front of our community and announcing that none of it mattered? That pursuing excellence is somehow wrong or misguided? We have poured our hearts, our money, and our lives into making you successful, she continued, her composure completely dissolving. We gave up vacations, luxury purchases, and our own dreams to invest in your future. And your response is to tell everyone that achievement doesn't matter, and that settling for second-rate institutions is perfectly fine. The circle of onlookers had grown larger, and I could see phones being discreetly raised as people began recording what was clearly becoming a viral-worthy family meltdown. Principal Morrison was making his way through the crowd, clearly recognizing that intervention was necessary to prevent further escalation. But my parents were beyond caring about public perception or social consequences. My father's voice reached a crescendo that could be heard across the entire lawn. "You are worthless, Sarah Chen. Absolutely worthless. We invested 18 years in building something exceptional, and instead we got a mediocre student heading to a mediocre university with a mediocre attitude about achievement. You are a complete waste of every opportunity we provided and every sacrifice we made." The word worthless echoed across the graduation lawn like a gunshot, silencing conversations and causing heads to turn throughout the gathering. In that moment, I felt something inside me break permanently, not just my heart, but my willingness to continue pursuing their approval or acceptance. The public nature of their cruelty had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, severing the last threads of obligation and familial loyalty that had bound me to their expectations. My mother's final contribution was perhaps the most devastating, because it was delivered with calculated coldness rather than explosive anger. "Don't expect us to continue supporting someone who publicly humiliates this family and rejects everything we've tried to teach about excellence and achievement. If mediocrity is what you want, then mediocrity is what you'll get. Without our help, without our support, and without our family name to open doors you couldn't open yourself." Principal Morrison finally reached our group and began attempting damage control, speaking in low tones about moving the conversation to a private location. But the damage was complete and irreversible. My parents had chosen to destroy their relationship with me in front of 3,000 witnesses, rather than allow my moment of authentic expression to stand unchallenged. Their need to control the narrative and maintain their image of superiority had overridden every instinct of parental protection and love. As security personnel began dispersing the crowd and encouraging families to move along, I stood in the center of the chaos feeling strangely calm. The worst had happened. I had been publicly disowned and humiliated by my own parents on what should have been one of the proudest days of my life. But instead of feeling crushed or defeated, I felt liberated from the impossible burden of earning their approval. Emma's father approached cautiously and offered their support, speaking quietly about having witnessed the entire incident and being available if I needed help or a place to stay. Other families made similar offers, their kindness highlighting the contrast between normal parental love and the conditional cruelty I had endured for 18 years. The community that had just witnessed my humiliation was rallying to provide the support my own family had withdrawn. Marcus appeared at my elbow, his face pale with shock and shame at our parents' behavior. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered. "That was completely wrong, and I don't agree with anything they said. You accomplished amazing things in high school, and your speech was perfect. They're the ones who should be embarrassed, not you." His loyalty meant everything in that moment of devastation. As my parents stalked away from the gathering without looking back, I realized that they had given me an unexpected gift. By severing our relationship so publicly and completely, they had freed me from the obligation to continue seeking their approval or acceptance. The chains of conditional love that had bound me for 18 years had been broken by their own actions, leaving me free to define success and achievement on my own terms. Standing on that graduation lawn surrounded by the kindness of friends and strangers while my parents disappeared into the parking lot, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday, somehow, I would prove them wrong in a way they could never ignore or dismiss. I would achieve the kind of success that would force them to confront the magnitude of their mistake. They had called me worthless in front of 3,000 people, but I would make sure that verdict was remembered as the most catastrophic error in judgment they had ever made. The formal ceremony was over, but my real education was just beginning. I had learned more about character, resilience, and authentic achievement in those 10 minutes of public humiliation than in 4 years of strategic academic performance. My parents had intended to crush my spirit and force my compliance with their expectations. Instead, they had forged my determination to succeed beyond their wildest dreams and eventually make them pay for every word they had spoken on graduation day. As Emma's family invited me to join their celebration dinner, and other classmates offered support and encouragement, I began to understand that real family wasn't defined by blood, but by unconditional love and mutual respect. The people surrounding me with kindness were demonstrating the values my biological family had failed to provide. I was no longer bound by their limitations or defined by their narrow definition of worth. The drive home that evening was silent, except for Marcus's occasional reassurances and apologies for our parents' behavior. When we arrived at the house, my parents had already retreated to their separate corners to process their own emotions without acknowledging the damage they had inflicted. The family pictures on the walls and academic achievements displayed throughout the house felt like museum exhibits from someone else's life, artifacts of a relationship that had died on the graduation lawn. That night, as I lay in my childhood bedroom surrounded by trophies and certificates that no longer held any meaning, I began planning my escape and eventual revenge. Northwestern University would become my launching pad rather than my consolation prize. I would use every resource, every opportunity, and every connection to build the kind of success that would ultimately allow me to purchase the one thing my parents valued more than anything else: the Victorian mansion on Elm Street that they had coveted since moving to Denver 20 years earlier. They had called me worthless in front of 3,000 people. Soon, I would own their dream house and prove just how wrong they had been. Moving into my Northwestern University dormitory 3 months after graduation felt like stepping into an alternate universe where my thoughts and opinions actually mattered. My roommate, Kelly Martinez, was a cheerful pre-med student from Phoenix whose parents had driven 18 hours to help her settle in, staying for 2 extra days just to make sure she felt comfortable and supported. Watching her family's genuine affection and pride created a sharp contrast with my own solitary arrival, having taken the bus from Denver with nothing but 2 suitcases and a burning determination to prove my worth. My parents had followed through on their graduation day threat to withdraw financial support, leaving me to navigate college expenses through a combination of academic scholarships, student loans, and the campus work-study program. the financial aid office had been surprisingly accommodating when I explained my situation, connecting me with additional grant opportunities and emergency assistance programs designed for students facing unexpected family crises. Mrs. Patricia Gonzalez, my financial aid counselor, became an early advocate who helped me understand that academic success could open doors to resources I never knew existed. The first semester challenged everything I thought I knew about learning and achievement. Professor David Richardson's Introduction to Psychology course became a revelation as I discovered that intelligence could be measured in ways that had nothing to do with my parents' narrow definition of academic excellence. His lectures on family systems theory and intergenerational trauma provided a framework for understanding my own experiences, helping me recognize that my parents' behavior reflected their own psychological limitations rather than my inherent inadequacy. During office hours, Professor Richardson encouraged my interest in the intersection between psychology and business, suggesting that understanding human motivation could become a powerful tool for entrepreneurial success. He recommended additional readings about behavioral economics and consumer psychology that sparked ideas about potential career paths I had never considered. For the first time in my academic career, I was pursuing knowledge out of genuine curiosity rather than external pressure. My work-study position in the university's Alumni Relations Office exposed me to stories of Northwestern graduates who had built extraordinary careers through unconventional paths. I spent hours updating donor databases and preparing materials for fundraising events. But more importantly, I was learning about successful entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and business leaders who had leveraged their liberal arts education into remarkable financial achievements. These alumni profiles became my secret inspiration as I began formulating long-term plans for my own career trajectory. The social dynamics of college life initially felt foreign after 18 years of carefully managed relationships designed to enhance my academic profile. Kelly introduced me to her friend group, a diverse collection of students who bonded over shared interests rather than strategic networking opportunities. They taught me how to have conversations that weren't goal-oriented, how to enjoy activities without analyzing their potential contribution to my resume, and how to form friendships based on genuine compatibility rather than parental approval. Emma Rodriguez visited during Parents' Weekend in October, driving up from Colorado State University with stories about her own college experience and updates about former classmates. Seeing her again reminded me of the person I had been before my parents' public humiliation, and her friendship provided continuity between my old life and the new identity I was building at Northwestern. She listened without judgment as I described my growing interest in business and entrepreneurship, offering encouragement for dreams that extended far beyond my parents' limited vision of appropriate career paths. During that visit, Emma shared disturbing news about my family's behavior since graduation. My parents had been telling people in our hometown that I was struggling academically and socially at Northwestern, suggesting that my rejection of their guidance was leading to predictable failures. They had apparently crafted a narrative where my rebellion against their wisdom was resulting in poor grades and social isolation, positioning themselves as concerned parents whose warnings had been vindicated by subsequent events. This revelation sparked a fierce determination to not only succeed, but to document that success in ways that would make their lives impossible to maintain. I began keeping detailed records of my academic achievements, leadership positions, and extracurricular accomplishments. Every high grade, every recognition, every positive interaction with professors became ammunition for the day when I would publicly contradict their false narrative about my college experience. My first semester grades exceeded even my own expectations. The freedom to pursue subjects that genuinely interested me, combined with the motivation to prove my parents wrong, resulted in a 3.97 GPA that earned me recognition on the dean's list. More importantly, I had discovered a passion for business strategy and consumer psychology that felt authentic rather than imposed by external expectations. Professor Richardson nominated me for an undergraduate research position that would allow me to explore the psychological factors that influence purchasing decisions. The research project, led by Dr. Amanda Foster in the business school, examined how emotional attachments to material possessions affect real estate buying behavior. Working with graduate students to design surveys and analyze data, I discovered a natural aptitude for understanding market psychology and consumer motivation. Dr. Foster's mentorship opened my eyes to the sophisticated analytical tools that successful businesses use to understand and influence customer behavior. During winter break, I remained on campus rather than returning to Denver, using the quiet period to accelerate my research work and explore additional academic opportunities. Dr. Foster introduced me to Professor Michael Chen, an economics faculty member who taught courses on entrepreneurship and venture capital. Despite sharing a surname with my parents, Professor Chen's approach to achievement and success felt completely different from the toxic competitiveness that had defined my childhood. Professor Chen's entrepreneurship seminar became the catalyst that transformed my vague dreams of business success into concrete plans with realistic timelines. He taught us to identify market opportunities by analyzing consumer pain points and developing innovative solutions. His guest lectures featured successful entrepreneurs who shared stories about building companies from scratch, many of whom had faced early failures and family skepticism before achieving breakthrough success. One guest speaker, Maria Santos, had built a multi-million-dollar marketing consultancy after being told by her own parents that business was no place for women. Her story resonated deeply as she described using her family's doubt as motivation to exceed every expectation they had set. She spoke about the satisfaction of proving wrong people who had underestimated her potential, and her words planted seeds that would eventually grow into my own revenge strategy. The spring semester brought new challenges and opportunities as I added advanced coursework in finance and marketing to my psychology foundation. Professor Jennifer Walsh's corporate finance class introduced me to the mechanics of real estate investment and property development, subjects that would prove crucial to my long-term plans. Her assignments required analyzing actual commercial real estate deals, teaching me to evaluate properties based on cash flow potential, market trends, and investment returns. My work-study position evolved into a leadership role as I demonstrated exceptional organizational skills and attention to detail. Mrs. Caroline Roberts, the Alumni Relations Director, began involving me in strategic planning for major fundraising campaigns. She taught me how successful nonprofits identify and cultivate major donors, lessons that would later prove invaluable when I needed to understand wealth accumulation and high net worth psychology. Through this work, I gained access to detailed profiles of Northwestern's most successful alumni, studying their career trajectories and business strategies. I noticed patterns among those who had built substantial wealth. Many had started with traditional career paths before identifying entrepreneurial opportunities in their mid-20s. This research helped me develop a strategic timeline for my own wealth-building goals, including specific milestones and benchmarks that would measure progress toward ultimate financial independence. The summer after freshman year presented a choice between returning to Denver for a low-paying retail job or pursuing an unpaid internship at a Chicago-based marketing firm. Despite the financial challenges, I chose the internship, taking out additional student loans to cover living expenses while gaining real-world experience in consumer research and brand strategy. The sacrifice felt worthwhile as I learned practical skills that complemented my academic foundation. Thompson & Associates Marketing became my introduction to the professional world, where intelligence and creativity were valued over pedigree and family connections. My supervisor, Jennifer Kim, was a Northwestern alumna who had built her career through exceptional performance rather than inherited advantages. She mentored me in client relations, market analysis, and strategic thinking, while sharing insights about navigating corporate politics and building professional networks. The internship project involved developing a marketing strategy for a luxury real estate firm, which provided my first exposure to high-end property markets and affluent consumer behavior. I spent weeks researching buyer psychology in luxury markets, learning how wealthy individuals make real estate decisions and what factors influence their willingness to pay premium prices. This knowledge would prove instrumental years later when I began my own real estate investment strategy. Jennifer Kim became an important mentor who helped me understand how psychological insights could be applied to business strategy and career advancement. She introduced me to the concept of personal branding, teaching me to present my background and achievements in ways that emphasize strengths, while minimizing the disadvantages of my limited financial resources and family support. Her guidance helped me develop confidence in professional settings, where I often felt outclassed by peers from more privileged backgrounds. Returning to Northwestern for sophomore year, I felt transformed by my summer experience and clear about my long-term objectives. My academic focus narrowed to courses that would provide practical business skills, while maintaining the psychology foundation that gave me insights into human motivation and behavior. Professor Chen invited me to join his advanced entrepreneurship seminar, a selective program that attracted the university's most ambitious business students. The entrepreneurship seminar functioned more like a startup incubator than a traditional classroom, with students developing actual business plans that could potentially attract real investment. My project focused on a consumer research consultancy that would help small businesses understand their target markets through psychological analysis and behavioral research. The business plan earned recognition from the university's Entrepreneurship Center and connected me with local business leaders who served as volunteer mentors. One of these mentors, Robert Thompson, was a successful real estate developer who had built a portfolio of luxury properties throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. His mentorship provided insights into property development, investment strategies, and the psychology of luxury buyers that would prove invaluable to my future plans. Robert taught me to think about real estate not just as shelter but as investment vehicles that could generate substantial returns when properly leveraged. My academic performance continued to exceed expectations, earning me additional scholarship opportunities in research positions that reduced my financial stress while building my resume. The Dean's List recognition became routine rather than exceptional, and my professors began discussing graduate school opportunities and potential career paths in consulting or business development. Their encouragement provided external validation that my abilities extended far beyond my parents' limited assessment. The psychology research I had begun freshman year evolved into an independent study project, examining how childhood family dynamics influence adult financial decision-making. Working with Professor Richardson, I designed surveys and conducted interviews with adult children from high-pressure families, discovering patterns that illuminated my own experiences while contributing original research to the academic literature. This project became the foundation for my senior thesis and provided insights that would inform my understanding of my parents' psychology. During winter break of sophomore year, I received an unexpected email from Marcus with disturbing news about our parents' situation. Their marriage was showing signs of serious strain as they struggled to process the consequences of their graduation day behavior. Several extended family members had witnessed the public humiliation and expressed disapproval of their actions, creating social pressure that they were struggling to manage. More significantly, their financial situation was deteriorating due to poor investment decisions and unexpected job market changes. Marcus explained that our father's engineering position had been eliminated during corporate restructuring, forcing him to accept a lower-paying role with reduced benefits and limited advancement potential. Our mother's accounting firm was losing clients to larger competitors, creating income instability that threatened their comfortable lifestyle. The stress of these changes was manifesting in increased conflict between them and growing resentment about the educational investments they had made in my future. This information sparked a mix of emotions. Sympathy for their struggles combined with bitter satisfaction that their focus on achievement and status was failing to protect them from life's uncertainties. I recognized an opportunity to begin positioning myself for the long-term strategy that had been developing in my mind since graduation day. Their financial vulnerabilities would eventually create openings for the revenge scenario I had been quietly planning. The spring semester brought new opportunities as Professor Chen recommended me for a competitive internship with Morrison Capital, a venture capital firm that specialized in early-stage technology companies. The selection process was rigorous, requiring multiple interviews and a detailed analysis of potential investment opportunities. Competing against students from elite universities with superior family connections, I emphasized my unique psychological insights and research background as differentiating factors. Landing the Morrison Capital internship felt like a major victory that validated my strategic approach to building expertise in areas where family wealth and connections were less important than analytical skills and original thinking. The work involved evaluating startup business plans, conducting market research, and supporting due diligence processes for potential investments. This exposure to high-level business strategy and financial analysis accelerated my understanding of wealth creation and investment psychology. My supervisor at Morrison Capital, Lisa Wang, was a rising star in the venture capital world who had built her reputation through identifying successful investments in overlooked markets and underestimated entrepreneurs. She taught me to recognize business opportunities that others missed, and to evaluate the psychological factors that determined whether entrepreneurs would succeed or fail under pressure. Her mentorship provided insights into the mindset and strategies required to build substantial wealth through strategic investments. The venture capital experience also exposed me to the luxury lifestyle that successful investors enjoyed, including expensive homes, exclusive social events, and the kind of financial freedom that my parents had always claimed to value. Observing this world from the inside, I began to understand the specific markers of wealth and status that would be necessary to eventually demonstrate my success in terms my parents would be forced to acknowledge. During this internship, I learned about real estate investment trusts, property development financing, and the complex financial instruments that wealthy individuals use to acquire luxury properties. This knowledge began to form the foundation for understanding how I could eventually accumulate enough wealth to purchase the Victorian mansion on Elm Street that my parents had coveted throughout my childhood. The house represented everything they valued about success and status, making it the perfect symbol for proving their graduation day assessment wrong. The summer internship concluded with an offer to return the following year, and strong recommendations that would open doors to other prestigious opportunities. More importantly, I had gained practical experience in evaluating investments and understanding market psychology that would prove invaluable when I began building my own wealth. The mentorship from Lisa Wang continued through regular check-ins and introductions to other successful professionals in her network. Junior year began with renewed focus and clarity about my post-graduation plans. The combination of academic achievement, practical business experience, and growing professional network had positioned me for opportunities that my parents had never imagined possible when they dismissed my potential 3 years earlier. Every success felt like another step toward the ultimate proof that their graduation day assessment had been catastrophically wrong. The entrepreneurship seminar evolved into an advanced independent study where I developed a comprehensive business plan for the consumer research consultancy that had become my primary post-graduation strategy. Professor Chen connected me with potential investors and clients who expressed genuine interest in the psychological insights I could provide. The business concept was gaining traction in ways that suggested real commercial viability after graduation. My research on family dynamics and financial decision-making attracted attention from academic journals and industry publications, establishing my reputation as an emerging expert in consumer psychology. Speaking engagements at university conferences and professional associations began building a public profile that would eventually contribute to my business credibility and client development. These opportunities provided platforms to share insights while building the personal brand that Jennifer Kim had taught me to cultivate. Marcus visited during family weekend, sharing updates about our parents' continuing struggles and their growing awareness that their financial situation was becoming precarious. Our father's reduced income and our mother's declining business were forcing lifestyle adjustments that threatened their carefully maintained image of middle-class stability. More significantly, they were beginning to acknowledge that their investment in my education had yielded returns they hadn't anticipated, though they remained too proud to admit their graduation day mistake. The conversation with Marcus revealed that our parents had been following my academic and professional progress through mutual acquaintances and social media, discovering achievements that contradicted their public narrative about my college struggles. They were particularly frustrated by reports of my internship success and growing recognition in academic circles, developments that made their claims about my inadequacy increasingly difficult to maintain. This intelligence confirmed that my strategy of documenting and publicizing my achievements was having the intended effect of undermining their credibility while building the foundation for eventual confrontation. Every recognition, every opportunity, and every success was simultaneously advancing my career goals and tightening the psychological pressure on parents who had staked their reputation on predicting my failure. Senior year arrived with offers from multiple graduate programs and consulting firms, reflecting the success of my strategic approach to building credentials and professional relationships. The choice between immediate employment and further education became a crucial decision point that would determine the timeline for achieving my ultimate revenge goals. After extensive consultation with mentors and careful financial analysis, I chose to accept a position with Blackstone Consulting, a prestigious firm that specialized in consumer research and market strategy for luxury brands. The Blackstone offer included a starting salary that exceeded my parents' combined income, along with signing bonuses and benefits that would provide the financial foundation for beginning my wealth accumulation strategy. More importantly, the client base included high-end real estate developers and luxury goods companies that would expand my understanding of affluent consumer behavior and provide networking opportunities within the wealthy circles I intended to join. Graduation from Northwestern took place in a dramatically different emotional context than my high school ceremony 4 years earlier. This time, I was surrounded by professors who celebrated my achievements, friends who supported my ambitions, and mentors who predicted exceptional career success. The contrast with my family's absence was stark but no longer painful. I had built a chosen family of supporters who valued my contributions and believed in my potential. Professor Chen's speech at the business school graduation included specific recognition of my research contributions and entrepreneurial potential, predictions that felt grounded in evidence rather than wishful thinking. His words provided public validation of achievements that my parents had never acknowledged and potential they had actively denied. The ceremony represented not just educational completion, but transformation into the kind of person who could ultimately purchase their dream house and make them tenants. The 4 years at Northwestern had exceeded every expectation I had set when I arrived as a devastated 18-year-old carrying the wounds of public humiliation. Instead of the mediocre performance my parents had predicted, I had achieved academic excellence while building practical business skills and professional relationships that positioned me for extraordinary career success. Their graduation day prophecy about my worthlessness was about to be proven spectacularly wrong through achievements they could never dismiss or minimize. Moving to Chicago for my consulting position felt like stepping into the life I had been building through strategic choices and relentless effort. The furnished apartment in Lincoln Park was modest, but represented independence and upward mobility that would accelerate over the coming years. More importantly, it was the launching pad for the wealth accumulation strategy that would eventually allow me to purchase the Victorian mansion that symbolized everything my parents valued about success and status. The time had come to begin the final phase of proving them wrong in the most definitive way possible. 5 years at Blackstone Consulting transformed me from a promising graduate into a senior strategist commanding six-figure fees for psychological insights that helped luxury brands understand their wealthiest customers. My expertise in consumer behavior had evolved into a specialized niche that made me indispensable to clients developing marketing strategies for ultra-high net worth individuals. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now earning more in a single quarter than my parents made in an entire year. The consulting work provided access to exclusive real estate markets and investment opportunities that most people never encountered. Through client relationships with luxury developers and private wealth managers, I learned about off-market property deals and investment strategies that accelerated wealth accumulation far beyond traditional savings approaches. My apartment in Lincoln Park had been replaced by a penthouse condo overlooking Lake Michigan, purchased entirely with cash earned through strategic consulting projects. Marcus had kept me informed about our parents' deteriorating situation throughout these years of professional ascension. Our father's career had stagnated at the reduced position, with no prospects for advancement or salary recovery. Our mother's accounting practice had lost most of its clients to corporate competitors, forcing her to accept contract work at rates far below her previous earnings. Their middle-class lifestyle was supported increasingly by credit and dwindling retirement savings. More significantly, the stress of financial decline was destroying their marriage and social standing within the community that had once respected their apparent success. The graduation day humiliation had become local legend, with multiple witnesses sharing videos and stories that painted them as abusive parents who had publicly destroyed their accomplished daughter. Their carefully constructed image of successful parenting had collapsed under the weight of documented evidence and community judgment. The Victorian mansion on Elm Street came on the market during my 6th year in Chicago, listed at $2.8 million by owners who were divorcing and needed quick liquidation. The timing felt like cosmic justice, as I had recently closed the largest consulting contract of my career, providing market research for a luxury hotel chain's expansion strategy. The fee alone was sufficient to purchase the house with cash, while maintaining substantial liquid reserves for additional investments. I contacted the listing agent directly and made an all-cash offer at full asking price with a 30-day closing timeline. The seller's attorney confirmed that my financial documentation was legitimate and the transaction could proceed without financing contingencies or inspection delays. Within 48 hours of the listing appearing, I had a signed purchase agreement for the house my parents had coveted throughout my entire childhood. The closing took place on a Tuesday morning in November, exactly 7 years after my college graduation day. Sitting in the attorney's office signing documents that transferred ownership of the mansion into my name felt surreal and satisfying in ways I had never anticipated. The house represented more than real estate. It was tangible proof that my parents' assessment of my worth had been catastrophically wrong, and that their limited vision had blinded them to my actual potential. Marcus helped coordinate the next phase of my plan by providing intelligence about our parents' current living situation. Their financial pressures had forced them to consider downsizing from the family home, but rental costs in desirable neighborhoods exceeded their reduced budget. They were facing the prospect of moving to a significantly less prestigious area or accepting rental terms that would strain their already limited income. I instructed my attorney to contact my parents through a property management company I had established specifically for this purpose. The offer appeared to come from a corporate landlord seeking responsible tenants for a recently acquired luxury property. The rental terms were slightly below market rate for a house of this caliber, making the opportunity attractive enough to overcome any suspicions about the timing or source. The rental application process required detailed financial disclosure that confirmed everything Marcus had reported about their deteriorating situation. Their combined income was less than half of what I now earned monthly, and their credit scores reflected the stress of recent financial struggles. Under normal circumstances, they would not qualify for a property of this value, but I instructed the management company to approve their application after appropriate reference checks. The lease signing took place at the property management office without my parents ever learning the identity of their actual landlord. They believed they had secured an exceptional rental opportunity through good fortune and diligent searching. The irony of their situation was invisible to them, as they expressed gratitude for finding such beautiful accommodations within their constrained budget. Moving day provided my first opportunity to observe their reactions to living in the house they had dreamed about for decades. I watched from a distance as they carried boxes into the grand foyer and marveled at the period details and luxury finishes that had always captured their imagination. Their excitement was genuine and touching, making me question whether my revenge plan was excessive punishment for their graduation day behavior. But then I remembered the word worthless, echoing across the graduation lawn, the public humiliation they had chosen to inflict rather than celebrate my achievements, and the years of conditional love that had preceded that moment. Their current happiness was built on ignorance of who was actually providing their opportunity to live in luxury. The revelation would come when the timing was perfect for maximum impact. That moment arrived 6 months later, when their lease renewal notice included a request for an in-person meeting with the property owner to discuss long-term rental arrangements. I had my attorney schedule the meeting at the mansion itself, suggesting that the owner wanted to inspect the property and discuss potential improvements based on their experience as tenants. The meeting was scheduled for a Saturday afternoon in May, exactly 8 years after my college graduation. I arrived at the house I now owned carrying legal documents and wearing a business suit that had cost more than my parents' monthly rent payment. When I rang the doorbell of my own property, the shock on their faces when they opened the door was everything I had imagined and more. My mother's immediate reaction was confusion, followed by dawning horror as she processed the implications of my presence. "Sarah, what are you doing here? Are you working for the property management company?" Her voice carried hope that there was an innocent explanation for my unexpected appearance at their front door. My father's reaction was immediate suspicion and anger. "This is some kind of setup, isn't it? You've been manipulating this situation somehow." His accusatory tone revealed that he suspected the truth even before I confirmed it with documentation. "Actually," I said, stepping into the foyer that I had purchased with my own earnings, "I am the property owner. This is my house. You are my tenants. And yes, this entire situation was planned exactly as it has unfolded." The words felt powerful and satisfying after years of strategic patience and careful execution. I handed them copies of the property deed showing my name as the legal owner, along with bank statements documenting the cash purchase and property management agreements that revealed my control over their living situation. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable, forcing them to confront the reality that their worthless daughter had achieved wealth sufficient to become their landlord. The silence that followed was deafening as they processed the complete reversal of power dynamics and the systematic nature of my plan. They were standing in a house they could never afford to purchase, paying rent to a daughter they had publicly dismissed as mediocre and destined for failure. The contradiction between their past assessment and current reality was impossible to rationalize or dismiss. My mother began crying quietly, overwhelmed by the emotional complexity of being proven so completely wrong, while simultaneously receiving generosity from someone she had helped humiliate. Her tears seemed to reflect genuine remorse rather than self-pity, though it was difficult to determine whether she was mourning their lost relationship or simply embarrassed by their current dependence. My father's response was more predictable anger and defensiveness rather than acknowledgement of error or appreciation for my success. "So this is your revenge? Buying us a house just to prove a point? How petty and vindictive can you possibly be?" His inability to recognize the irony of calling me petty while living in luxury I was providing revealed the psychological limitations that had always defined his character. "Actually," I replied calmly, "this isn't revenge, this is proof. 8 years ago you called me worthless in front of 3,000 people. You said I was mediocre and would remain mediocre. You predicted failure and withdrawal of support to guarantee that failure. This house represents evidence that every prediction you made was wrong." I continued, gesturing around the elegant living room where they had been enjoying amenities they could never afford independently. "You are currently living in luxury that I purchased with money I earned through the achievements you dismissed. Your comfortable lifestyle exists because someone you called worthless chose to provide it. The power dynamic has completely reversed, and you are dependent on my generosity for the lifestyle you both desperately wanted." The meeting concluded with revised lease terms that reduced their monthly payments while extending their tenancy for 5 years with guaranteed renewal options. I had no intention of displacing them or creating financial hardship. The point was demonstration of capability rather than punishment through deprivation. They would continue living in their dream house while knowing exactly who was making that dream possible. Walking away from that confrontation, I felt a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The revenge was complete and overwhelmingly effective, but it had also revealed the small and bitter people my parents had always been beneath their pretensions of superiority. They were not capable of growth or acknowledgement of error, only resentment at being proven wrong by someone they had underestimated. Marcus later reported that our parents had experienced a marriage crisis following the revelation, with each blaming the other for the graduation day behavior that had alienated their successful daughter. Our father continued insisting that I was vindictive and manipulative, while our mother expressed regret for their past treatment and wondered about reconciliation possibilities. Neither response surprised me, given their established patterns of avoiding responsibility. The years that followed brought continued professional success and investment returns that multiplied my wealth far beyond what was necessary for comfortable living. I established a scholarship fund at Northwestern for students from difficult family situations, providing opportunities for academic achievement without the conditional love that had poisoned my own educational experience. The giving felt more meaningful than the revenge, though both had been necessary for my psychological healing. The Victorian mansion became a symbol not just of my success, but of the power of authentic achievement over artificial expectations. My parents continued living there as tenants, their daily existence, a constant reminder that the daughter they had dismissed as worthless had become their benefactor and landlord. Every month, when they signed their rent check, they were acknowledging the magnitude of their error in judgment. Emma visited frequently during these years, marveling at the transformation from the devastated teenager she had supported through the graduation crisis to the successful businesswoman who had orchestrated such complete vindication. Her friendship had provided continuity and perspective throughout the journey, helping me maintain connection to my authentic self while building the strategic persona necessary for business success. The story became local legend in our hometown, with multiple versions circulating about the girl whose parents had humiliated her at graduation only to discover she had become wealthy enough to purchase their dream house and make them tenants. Most versions got the details wrong, but all captured the essential justice of parents learning they had catastrophically underestimated their child's potential and worth. Looking back, I realized that my parents gave me an unexpected gift that night when they called me worthless in front of 3,000 people. They freed me from the obligation to seek their approval and forced me to define success on my own terms. Their public cruelty became the catalyst for achievements that exceeded anything their limited imagination could have envisioned for my future. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.